I never thought I would become the family villain for choosing to keep my own children. 10 years ago, my parents and sister manipulated me into becoming a surrogate, using guilt and family obligation to override my concerns. When I discovered they planned to cut me out of the twins' lives completely, I made the hardest decision ever, keeping the babies I carried in my womb. They disowned me instantly, calling me a thief of Jessica's dreams. Now they're at my door begging for bone marrow for my dying sister, unaware that the truth I'm about to reveal will leave them speechless. Growing up in our middle-class neighborhood in Greenfield, Pennsylvania, I always lived in Jessica's shadow. Our modest 2-story colonial house felt like a shrine to her accomplishments. The hallway walls displayed her dance recital trophies, academic awards, and glamorous prom photos. My parents, Martha and Richard Davis, never tried to hide their favoritism. "Taylor, why can't you apply yourself like your sister?" Mom would ask whenever my report card showed anything less than an A. Dad was subtler but no less effective, with comments like, "Jessica never gave us this much trouble at your age." Jessica was 3 years older, impossibly beautiful, with her honey blonde hair and green eyes that sparkled when she laughed. She breezed through school, dated the captain of the football team, and secured a full scholarship to Penn State. I was the quiet, responsible one, with plain brown hair and a practical mindset that led me to community college and nursing school. By the time I was 26, I had established myself as a registered nurse at Greenfield Memorial Hospital. I lived in a small but comfortable apartment, worked the night shift in the intensive care unit, and was slowly paying off my student loans. Meanwhile, Jessica had married Andrew Thompson, the son of a local real estate developer, right after college. They bought a sprawling house in the affluent part of town, complete with a pool and 3-car garage. Our parents spoke of Jessica and Andrew's life as if it were a fairy tale. "They're just perfect together," Mom would gush during Sunday dinners, which I still dutifully attended despite the inevitable comparisons. I was folding laundry on a rare day off when Mom called, her voice uncharacteristically somber. "Taylor, we need to have a family meeting tonight. Jessica has some news." Something in her tone made my stomach knot. "Is everything okay? Just be at our house by 6. It's important." When I arrived, the atmosphere was heavy. Jessica's eyes were red-rimmed, and Andrew sat stiffly beside her, his jaw clenched. Mom kept touching Jessica's shoulder while Dad paced behind the sofa. "I can't have children," Jessica finally said, her voice breaking. "The endometriosis is worse than we thought. The doctor says my uterus is too damaged to sustain a pregnancy." The room fell silent except for Jessica's soft crying. I moved to hug her, feeling genuine sympathy despite our complicated relationship. "We've looked into adoption," Andrew said, "but the waiting lists are years long, and with my father's political ambitions, he's concerned about complications." I should have recognized the calculated look that passed between my parents then. "Taylor," Mom said, taking my hand, "we've been discussing options, and there might be a way you could help your sister." "Family helps family," Dad added, nodding sagely. Jessica looked up at me, eyes brimming with hope. "They can use my eggs and Andrew's sperm, but I need someone I can trust to carry the baby." "You want me to be your surrogate?" The words felt strange in my mouth. "It would be the most incredible gift," Jessica whispered. "You've always been so strong and healthy." "Think about it," Mom urged. "You could give your sister the one thing she wants most in the world." They made it sound so simple, like borrowing a cup of sugar or giving someone a ride to the airport. Not 9 months of pregnancy, the physical toll on my body, the emotional complexity. "I need time to consider this," I said, overwhelmed by their expectant faces. "Of course," Dad said, though his tone suggested anything less than immediate agreement would be a disappointment. Later that night, I stopped by my parents' house to retrieve the sweater I'd left behind. The house was quiet, and I assumed everyone had gone to bed. As I reached for my sweater draped over a dining room chair, I noticed Mom's phone on the table lighting up with a text notification. I shouldn't have looked, but the preview caught my eye. "Reoperation convince Taylor." My fingers moved before my conscience could object. I opened the message thread between Mom and Jessica from 3 months earlier. "Found another clinic in Pittsburgh," Mom had written. "They have excellent success rates for surrogacy." Jessica's reply: "Did you mention it to Taylor yet?" "Not yet. We need to approach this delicately." You know how she gets when she feels pressured. But she's always been the easiest to persuade when we unite as a family. I scrolled up my hands, shaking as I discovered dozens of messages detailing their plan to convince me. They had researched clinics, discussed financial arrangements with Andrew's family, even strategized about what emotional buttons to push to ensure my cooperation. Dad thinks we should emphasize family duty, Mom had written. Your tears will help too. I felt physically ill as I realized the family meeting hadn't been an emotional revelation, but a carefully orchestrated performance. My compassion had been weaponized against me. I placed the phone back exactly as I'd found it, and left without my sweater tears blurring my vision as I drove home. I spent a sleepless night wrestling with what I'd discovered. By morning, anger had replaced my shock. I called in sick to work and drove straight to my parents' house, determined to confront them. I found Mom in the kitchen preparing breakfast, humming cheerfully. She looked surprised to see me. Taylor, what are you doing here so early? I saw your messages, I said flatly. The ones about Operation Convince Taylor. How long have you been planning to use me as Jessica's incubator? The color drained from her face. You went through my phone. That's a violation of privacy. The irony was staggering. And planning how to manipulate me into 9 months of pregnancy without giving me all the information isn't... Dad walked in immediately, sensing the tension. What's going on? I explained what I'd discovered, watching his expression shift from surprise to defensiveness. You're overreacting, he said finally. Yes, we discussed how to approach you beforehand, but only because we knew how important it was to Jessica. And not at all important to me. My body, my life, my choice. Taylor, Mom said, her voice softening to the persuasive tone I now recognized as manipulation. Jessica is devastated. She cries herself to sleep every night. Andrew has even mentioned that he's not sure their marriage can survive without children. That's emotional blackmail. It's the truth, Dad countered. Family helps family. Your sister would do the same for you. Would she? I wasn't so sure. As if summoned by our argument, Jessica and Andrew arrived. Jessica's eyes were puffy, her normally perfect appearance disheveled. Taylor, she said, noticing my angry stance. What's wrong? She knows we've been planning this. Mom explained quickly. She found our messages. Jessica at least had the grace to look embarrassed. Andrew merely looked annoyed, checking his watch as if my emotional turmoil was inconveniencing him. I just wanted a baby so badly, Jessica whispered. Is that so wrong? Wanting a baby isn't wrong. Conspiring to pressure me into being your surrogate without honest conversation is. Andrew stepped forward. Look, we can pay you. Whatever's reasonable. This doesn't have to be complicated. It is complicated. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. You're asking me to put my life on hold, risk my health, and hand over children I would carry for 9 months. Did you even research what pregnancy does to a woman's body? You're a nurse, Jessica countered weakly. You understand the medical aspects better than anyone, which is exactly why I deserve complete transparency and respect for my decision-making process. The argument continued in circles, with my family alternating between apologies and renewed pressure. Jessica eventually dissolved into tears, which prompted Mom to give me a disappointed look that I'd seen countless times growing up. Just think about it, Taylor, she pleaded. We can talk to the fertility specialist together. No pressure, just information. Against my better judgment and ignoring the screaming red flags, I agreed to an initial consultation. Perhaps a medical professional could bring some objectivity to the situation. Dr. Eleanor Walsh at the Pittsburgh Fertility Center was a petite woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She insisted on speaking with me privately first, which visibly annoyed Jessica and my mother. Taylor, Dr. Walsh said once we were alone in her office, I want to be clear that you are my patient here. Your health and informed consent are my primary concerns. My family has already decided this is happening, I admitted. She frowned. That's not how surrogacy works. This is a significant commitment with physical and emotional impacts. I strongly recommend independent counseling before proceeding. I'd like that, I said, relieved someone was acknowledging the gravity of the decision. When I emerged and suggested psychological counseling, my family reacted with impatience. That will delay everything by months, Andrew complained. If Taylor needs hand-holding through this, then fine, Jessica conceded, though her tone suggested it was anything but fine. The psychological evaluation was rushed and superficial. The therapist seemed more interested in checking boxes than genuinely exploring my reservations. Still uncertain but worn down by constant family pressure, I finally agreed to begin the medical preparations. The process moved quickly after that. Jessica's eggs were harvested and fertilized with Andrew's sperm. I underwent a regimen of hormones to prepare my uterus for embryo transfer. The injections were painful, the side effects unpleasant, but Jessica's renewed excitement made it difficult to voice my discomfort. On the day of the embryo transfer, I lay on the examination table in a paper gown, feeling vulnerable and increasingly anxious. Dr. Walsh reviewed the procedure with me, but something in her expression seemed off. "We'll be transferring the embryos today," she said. "Embryos primera?" questioned. "Plural." Dr. Walsh glanced at her chart, then at Jessica, who stood nearby. "Yes, 2 embryos to increase the chances of successful implantation. Didn't your sister discuss this with you?" "No," I said, looking at Jessica. "We agreed to transfer 1 embryo." Jessica avoided my gaze. "The doctor and I thought 2 would be better, just to be safe." "I never recommended this without the surrogate's explicit consent," Dr. Walsh said sharply. "Taylor, it's not a big deal," Jessica insisted. "Twins run in Andrew's family anyway." I felt trapped, already prepped for the procedure and pumped full of hormones. The realization hit me they had deliberately waited until this moment to mention twins, knowing I would be less likely to back out. "I think we need to pause this procedure," Dr. Walsh suggested, clearly uncomfortable. "No," I said after a long moment. "Let's proceed." It wasn't agreement, it was resignation. As the embryos were transferred into my body, I felt an overwhelming sense that I had lost control of something fundamental. My body had become a vessel for my family's desires. My consent, an inconvenient formality to be circumvented. Dr. Walsh squeezed my hand before I left, slipping me her personal card. "Call me anytime," she whispered, "for any reason." 2 weeks later, the pregnancy test was positive. Both embryos had implanted successfully. I was carrying twins. The first trimester hit me hard. Morning sickness wasn't just a morning affair, but an all-day ordeal that left me exhausted and dehydrated. I had to reduce my nursing shifts from 4 12-hour shifts to 3, which meant a significant cut in my income. Jessica initially seemed supportive, bringing me ginger tea and saltine crackers. Mom called daily to check on me, but I quickly noticed their concerns centered on the babies, not my well-being. "Are you eating enough protein?" Mom would ask. "The babies need proper nutrition. The doctor says you should be walking 30 minutes daily," Jessica reminded me constantly. "It's important for the baby's development." I was no longer Taylor. I was merely the carrier of precious cargo. By the 4th month, my body had begun to change dramatically. My once flat stomach now protruded noticeably. My feet swelled, and I developed an aversion to the hospital disinfectant smell that had never bothered me before. The obstetrician confirmed that carrying twins put me at higher risk for complications, and, sure enough, at 20 weeks I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes. "You'll need to monitor your blood sugar levels and follow a strict diet," Dr. Simmons explained. "And I'm concerned about your blood pressure. It's trending upward." The diabetes diagnosis prompted my family to increase their monitoring. Mom showed up unannounced with pre-prepared meals, scrutinizing everything in my refrigerator. "Graham crackers. Taylor, these are full of carbs. Are you trying to make yourself sicker?" Jessica scheduled her own appointments with my obstetrician to discuss the baby's progress, then reported back to me, as if I hadn't been at every single appointment myself. But something unexpected was happening alongside the discomfort and intrusion. As the babies grew inside me, I began to feel connected to them. The first time I felt them move, tiny butterfly flutters in my abdomen, tears sprang to my eyes. By 24 weeks, I could distinguish between them. One was more active in the morning, the other at night. I started calling them Morning Star and Night Owl in my head. I mentioned this to Jessica during one of her daily check-ins. "Don't name them," she said sharply. "Andrew and I have already chosen their names. Elizabeth and Catherine after his grandmothers. I'm not naming them, I clarified. It's just how I think of them when they move. Well, don't get too attached, she warned. Remember, they're not really yours. Her words stung more than I expected. Not really mine. Despite growing inside my body, despite my blood nourishing them, despite the changes I endured to bring them safely into the world. As the pregnancy progressed, Jessica and Andrew became increasingly specific about their expectations for the birth and beyond. We want a scheduled C-section, Andrew announced during a family dinner. It's more predictable, and Jessica's therapist thinks it will help with the bonding process if there's a clear handover. But recovery from C-section is much harder, I protested. And there are benefits to vaginal birth for the baby's immune systems. This isn't about what's convenient for you, Jessica snapped. These are our children. The tension escalated when they presented me with their birth plan. They would be in the delivery room. The babies would go directly to Jessica for skin-to-skin contact. I would be discharged as soon as medically possible, and they preferred I not attempt to see the babies during the hospital stay to avoid confusion. And after I asked quietly, "What role will I have in their lives?" "You'll be Aunt Taylor, of course," Jessica said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "But we think it's best if we have some space in the beginning, maybe after 6 months or so when they're less impressionable." Something about her phrasing bothered me deeply. 6 months seemed arbitrary and excessive. What was she afraid of? That the babies would somehow recognize me as their birth mother. My suspicions grew when Jessica began restricting access to her home. Previously, I'd had a key for plant watering and mail collecting when they traveled. Now she always had an excuse when I stopped by meeting me at the door, rather than inviting me in. One afternoon I arrived earlier than expected to drop off some pregnancy books Jessica had requested. Their housekeeper Maria answered the door. "They're not home," she explained. "But come in, they should be back soon." Grateful for the chance to rest my swollen feet, I settled in their expansive living room. After 20 minutes of waiting, I asked to use the bathroom. "Of course," Maria said. "You know where it is." On my way back, I passed Andrew's home office. The door was ajar, and a stack of legal documents on his desk caught my eye. The top page bore my name in bold type. Without thinking, I stepped inside and picked up the papers. What I read made my blood run cold. It was a legal agreement terminating all my parental rights immediately after birth. But what shocked me most were the additional clauses I would agree not to seek any contact with the children for a minimum of 5 years. I would not identify myself as their biological connection in any way. And most disturbing there was language suggesting I had a history of emotional instability that made me unfit for maternal responsibilities. It was character assassination disguised as legal protection for them. Where had they gotten the idea I was emotionally unstable? Had they been building a case against me all along? I was still standing there, papers trembling in my hands, when Jessica and Andrew returned home. Jessica's face transformed from surprise to fury when she saw what I was holding. "You're going through our private papers now," she demanded. "When were you planning to ask me to sign away my existence?" I countered. "And what's this about me being emotionally unstable?" Andrew stepped forward, his attorney persona taking over. "It's standard legal language to protect our family. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. You're claiming I'm mentally unfit." "Taylor, be reasonable," Jessica pleaded, though her eyes remained cold. "We need to ensure clear boundaries. It would be confusing for the children to have 2 mothers. You told me I'd be their aunt," I reminded her. "Now you're planning to keep me away for 5 years, while telling them what exactly that I don't exist." "You're overreacting," Andrew said dismissively. "Pregnancy hormones are making you emotional." In that moment, everything crystallized. I wasn't a sister helping a sister. I wasn't even a person to them. I was a walking womb, a means to an end, disposable once my usefulness expired. I walked out without another word, my hands protectively cradling my swollen belly where Morning Star and Night Owl tumbled restlessly, as if sensing my distress. Week 28 brought another complication: preeclampsia. My blood pressure spiked dangerously high during a routine checkup, and Dr. Simmons immediately admitted me to Greenfield Memorial. "Bed rest," she ordered. "We need to monitor you closely and try to get those numbers down." I called Jessica from my hospital room, expecting her to rush over. "Oh no, that's terrible," she said, sounding distracted. "Is it dangerous for the babies?" "Dr. Simmons is concerned about all three of us," I replied, emphasizing the all. "We have a charity gala tonight, but I'll try to stop by tomorrow. Keep me updated on their condition." Their condition, not mine. I hung up feeling utterly alone. To my surprise, my parents didn't visit either. Mom called to explain they were helping Jessica prepare the nursery and would try to swing by in a few days. The nursery preparations apparently took priority over their daughter confined to a hospital bed with a potentially life-threatening condition. 3 days passed. The nurses were kind but busy. The hospital social worker, Diane Reynolds, noticed me crying during her rounds. "No visitors?" she asked gently, pulling up a chair. "My family is busy," I managed, wiping my eyes. "The baby's father." "Complicated situation," I said, then found myself pouring out the whole story to this compassionate stranger. Diane listened without judgment, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "Taylor, what you're describing sounds like reproductive coercion," she said finally. "Were you pressured into this arrangement?" "I agreed to it," I insisted weakly. "Under duress and without full information," she pointed out. "And now they're isolating you during a medical crisis, while preparing legal documents to cut you out of your children's lives. That's not a healthy dynamic." "But they're Jessica's eggs," I said. "Genetically, they're her children." "Biology is only one aspect of parenthood," Diane replied. "Legally speaking, in Pennsylvania, the woman who gives birth is presumed to be the legal mother, unless there's a properly executed surrogacy agreement with independent legal representation for all parties. I never had my own lawyer," I admitted. "Everything was handled by Andrew and his firm." Diane's expression turned serious. "Then you still have legal rights to these children, if you chose to assert them." The thought had never occurred to me until that moment. I had always assumed the babies would go to Jessica and Andrew. It was the plan, the reason for this whole arrangement. But with each passing day, with each kick and hiccup from within, with each dismissive comment and manipulative action from my family, something had shifted. "I could keep them," I whispered, the possibility both terrifying and exhilarating. "You could," Diane confirmed. "But it would mean confronting your family, and likely severing those relationships. It's not a decision to make lightly." I spent the next 24 hours in deep reflection, weighing my options and examining my feelings. I thought about Jessica and Andrew's unstable relationship, about the legal documents planning to erase me from the twins' lives, about the connection I felt to these tiny humans growing beneath my heart. On the 5th day of my hospitalization, Jessica finally visited. She breezed in with a gift bag containing baby lotion and 2 identical teddy bears. "For the nursery," she explained cheerfully. "We've gone with a woodland theme, all greens and browns, very gender neutral." I noticed she didn't ask how I was feeling, or acknowledge the IV in my arm. Instead, she launched into complaints about the caterer for the baby shower her friends were planning. "Jessica," I interrupted, "I need to talk to you about something important." "Can it wait? I've got a hair appointment in 40 minutes. "No, it can't wait." I took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about our arrangement, and I have serious concerns." She finally focused on me, her expression wary. "What concerns?" "The legal documents I found, for one. The fact that you and Andrew plan to cut me out of the twins' lives. The way you've all treated me during this hospitalization." Jessica's face hardened. "You're still upset about those papers," Andrew says. "They're standard practice. They're deceptive and cruel. And they make me question your intentions." "My intentions? I want my children, Taylor. The children we agreed you would carry for me." "Under false pretenses," I countered. "You never mentioned twins until it was too late to object. You've been making unilateral decisions about my body and the birth. And now I learn you plan to prevent me from seeing them for years." "You're being dramatic," she dismissed. "Once the babies are born, you can go back to your life. Isn't that what you want?" That was the moment I knew. She couldn't conceive of me feeling maternal toward the babies I carried. In her mind, I was merely performing a service, like a living incubator. "I've made a decision," I said quietly. "I'm keeping the babies." Jessica stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. That's not funny. I'm not joking. I've consulted with a social worker. There's no legal surrogacy agreement, Jessica. I never had independent counsel. In the eyes of the law, these are my children. Her face contorted with rage. You selfish bitch. You can't do this to me. Like you've done to me. Manipulated me. Used me. Lied to me. Those are my eggs. My babies. She screamed loud enough to bring a nurse running. Is everything okay? The nurse asked, looking between us with concern. My sister needs to leave, I said firmly. She's upsetting me and raising my blood pressure. You need to go, the nurse told Jessica. The patient needs rest. This isn't over, Jessica hissed as the nurse escorted her out. You think you can steal my children? You have no idea what's coming. She was right about that much. I had no idea what was coming, but I knew I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. For better or worse, I had just declared war on my entire family. Within hours, my parents arrived, their faces masks of disappointment and anger. What is this nonsense Jessica told us? Dad demanded without preamble. It's not nonsense, I replied, surprising myself with my calm. I've decided to keep the twins. Mom collapsed dramatically into the visitor's chair. How could you even think of doing this to your sister? After all we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me during this pregnancy? I asked. Besides, check on the baby's welfare and plan how to remove me from their lives. We've supported you, Dad insisted, by not visiting me in the hospital for 5 days, by prioritizing nursery decorations over my health. That's not support. You agreed to this, Mom reminded me. You knew they were Jessica's babies. I agreed under pressure, without full information, and without legal representation. And I've since learned you planned to lie about my mental health, to ensure I couldn't see them. Mom at least had the grace to look ashamed. Dad just looked calculating. What do you want? He asked finally. Money. Is that it? The question was so offensive, I almost laughed. I want to be treated with respect and honesty. I want to make decisions about my body and my life without manipulation. And I want these babies to grow up in a stable, loving home. With you, Mom scoffed. A single nurse who works night shifts. How will you manage twins alone? I'll figure it out, I said, with more confidence than I felt. But at least they'll be with someone who values truth and compassion over appearances and control. If you do this, Dad said, his voice dangerously quiet, you are no longer our daughter. You will be dead to this family. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. Even knowing how they had manipulated me, even anticipating their anger, the finality of his statement took my breath away. This was the price of my decision, complete excommunication from the only family I had ever known. Then I guess I'm dead to you, I said, my voice breaking despite my resolve, because I'm keeping my daughters. They left without another word. As the door closed behind them, I placed both hands on my swollen abdomen, feeling the twins shift beneath my touch. It's just us now, I whispered. But we'll be okay, I promise. 2 weeks later, at 30 weeks gestation, my blood pressure spiked again. Dr. Simmons decided an emergency C-section was necessary to protect my health and give the twins their best chance. They'll be premature, she warned, but our NICU is excellent. We'll do everything possible for them. I signed the consent forms with shaking hands. This wasn't how I'd imagined bringing my daughters into the world 10 weeks early and completely alone. But I wasn't entirely alone. Diane from social services came to sit with me before surgery, holding my hand and assuring me she'd stay through the procedure. Several nurses I knew from my shifts at the hospital stopped by with encouraging words. Dr. Walsh, the fertility specialist, who had first warned me, called to wish me well. The operating room was bright and cold. I shivered under the thin surgical drape as the anesthesiologist administered the spinal block. Soon I felt nothing from the chest down, just the strange sensation of pressure as the surgeons worked. At 7:15 and 7:17 in the evening, my daughters entered the world, their cries, and thin but determined. Emma weighed 3 pounds 8 ounces, while Lily was slightly smaller at 3 pounds 5 ounces. The neonatologist quickly assessed them before whisking them to the NICU, but not before I glimpsed their tiny, perfect faces, red and wrinkled and beautiful. I expected my family to appear despite our confrontation. Surely the birth of children would transcend anger. But the hours passed, and my recovery room remained devoid of flowers or congratulations. Diane brought me my phone, which showed dozens of missed calls from Jessica, Andrew, and my parents. I couldn't face listening to their messages yet. The next morning, a hospital administrator appeared looking uncomfortable. "Miss Davis, I need to inform you that your sister and her husband are attempting to gain access to the NICU. They're claiming the babies are legally theirs." My heart raced. "They're not. I'm the legal mother." "Yes, our records reflect that," she assured me. "But they've brought an attorney. Hospital security is monitoring the situation, but I wanted you to be aware." By afternoon, a social worker I didn't know arrived with paperwork. Andrew had filed an emergency petition for custody, claiming the twins were the product of a surrogacy arrangement and belonged with their intended parents. I panicked until Diane connected me with Patricia Mueller, a family law attorney who offered pro bono services through the hospital. "This petition is full of holes," Patricia said after reviewing the documents. "There's no properly executed surrogacy contract, no evidence of independent counsel for you, and Pennsylvania law presumes the birth mother is the legal mother, absent clear agreement otherwise." "So they can't take them?" I asked, desperate for reassurance. "Not legally, no. But be prepared for a fight." She was right. The next 3 weeks became a blur of legal maneuvers and hospital visits. The twins remained in the NICU, growing stronger each day while I recovered from surgery and expressed breast milk for them. I was allowed to hold them, to participate in their care, to whisper promises and love into their tiny ears. Andrew's legal team tried everything from claims of oral agreement to accusations that I was mentally unstable and had stolen Jessica's genetic material. Each attempt failed in the face of Pennsylvania's clear laws regarding surrogacy and Patricia's skillful advocacy. What broke my heart was how quickly my family escalated to character assassination. Former friends contacted me saying my parents had told them I'd had a psychotic break and kidnapped Jessica's babies. Extended family members sent scathing messages calling me selfish and cruel. Someone even contacted the hospital administration suggesting I was unfit to work as a nurse given my mental instability. Patricia helped me secure a restraining order against Jessica and Andrew after Jessica tried to enter the NICU by impersonating me. The hospital increased security, and I lived in constant fear that someone would somehow take my daughters. After 38 days, Emma and Lily were finally strong enough to come home. My tiny apartment seemed woefully inadequate for 2 infants, but I had transformed my bedroom into a nursery, painting the walls, a soft yellow, and assembling secondhand cribs with help from co-workers who had become my support system. Those first months were the hardest of my life. The twins needed feeding every 2 hours. I was recovering from major surgery while learning to care for premature babies. Sleep became a distant memory. My savings dwindled rapidly as I extended my leave from work. Yet amid the exhaustion and anxiety, there were moments of pure joy. Emma's first real smile, Lily's serious expressions as she studied my face, the way they instinctively reached for each other, even in separate cribs. The legal battles continued. Andrew's family had resources I couldn't match, and they seemed determined to wear me down through endless court motions and appeals. Each hearing drained my limited funds and energy. Then came the final blow. I received notice that my nursing license was under review based on complaints about my mental fitness. It was a direct attack on my ability to support my daughters. "They're trying to destroy me," I told Patricia during a tear-filled consultation. "I can't fight them forever." "You don't have to," she said firmly. "We have a strong case for harassment now, and I have a suggestion that might seem radical: leave Pennsylvania." She explained that while the courts had repeatedly upheld my parental rights, the continued proximity to my family created ongoing vulnerability. Moving to another state could provide a fresh start and make it more difficult for them to continue their campaign against me. But where would I go? How would I support the twins? I have colleagues in Denver who might be able to help. Colorado has excellent maternal protection laws, and their healthcare system is always looking for experienced nurses. It felt like running away, but Patricia helped me see it as running towards something better. A friend from nursing school, Melissa, had moved to Denver years earlier, and offered to let us stay with her while I got established. My supervisors at the hospital, understanding the situation, provided glowing references. 3 months after the twins' birth, with the legal situation as stable as it could be, I packed our meager belongings into my aging Honda and headed west. Leaving Pennsylvania meant leaving behind everything familiar, but as the mountains appeared on the horizon, I felt something unexpected: hope. Denver welcomed us with open arms. Melissa's spare bedroom became our temporary home, while I secured a position at University Hospital. The Colorado Board of Nursing reviewed my case and quickly approved my license transfer, finding no merit to the complaints from Pennsylvania. By the time Emma and Lily were 6 months old, we had our own small 2-bedroom apartment near a park. I found a daycare run by a retired nurse, who gave me a discount in exchange for occasional weekend coverage. Slowly, we built a new life. I thought about my family, often wondering if they ever regretted their actions or missed their granddaughters. One day a year after our move, I received a message from my cousin Grace through social media. "I don't agree with how they treated you," she wrote, "but I thought you should know Jessica and Andrew divorced. It was ugly. She's been struggling with prescription pills, and he's moved to Boston with some woman from his office. Your parents spent a fortune on lawyers and apparently tried to find another surrogate. But after what happened with you, no agency would work with them. I felt no satisfaction at their misfortunes, only sadness for what could have been. I sent Grace photos of the twins, but asked her not to share them with my parents or Jessica. It was a small opening, a tiny acknowledgement that while I had closed one door, others might someday be ajar." The twins grew from fragile preemies to sturdy toddlers. Emma was bold and adventurous, while Lily was thoughtful and observant. They had Jessica's green eyes, but my stubborn chin, and increasingly personalities entirely their own. By their 3rd birthday, our life in Colorado felt established and secure. I had been promoted to charge nurse, completed a certification in neonatal care, and made friends who became the family we chose, rather than the one we were born into. I never regretted my decision to keep them, not even during the hardest nights or most painful memories. They were my daughters in every way that mattered, and watching them grow healthy and happy confirmed I had made the right choice, despite the terrible cost. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm as the twins grew. We celebrated birthdays at the park, went camping in the Rocky Mountains during summers, and built a life rich with simple joys. I dated occasionally, but never found anyone who understood the complexity of our situation, or who I trusted enough to introduce to my daughters. By the time Emma and Lily turned 10, they knew the basics of their unusual origin story. I had always been honest with them in age-appropriate ways, explaining that Aunt Jessica had helped create them, but couldn't carry babies in her tummy, so I had carried them instead. I explained that sometimes grown-ups disagree about important things, which was why we didn't see that side of the family. "But why don't they want to know us?" Lily asked, once her analytical mind always seeking deeper understanding. "Sometimes people get stuck in their anger and can't find their way out," I explained. "It doesn't mean they don't love you in their own way." Emma, always more direct, had a simpler take. "Their loss. We're awesome." That made me laugh. She wasn't wrong. We had just celebrated the twins' 10th birthday with a sleepover party for their friends when the past literally knocked on our door. It was a Sunday morning and the girls were still in pajamas eating pancakes. I opened the door expecting the neighbor's child selling Girl Scout cookies. Instead, I found myself face to face with my parents. They had aged dramatically. Dad's once dark hair was completely gray, his tall frame stooped and thin. Mom, who had always taken pride in her appearance, looked drawn and tired, deep lines etched around her eyes and mouth. Taylor Mom whispered, her eyes filling with tears. I stood frozen, unable to process their presence on my doorstep after 10 years of silence. "Mom, who is it?" Emma called from the kitchen. The sound of her voice seemed to jolt all of us. Dad's eyes widened, and Mom pressed a hand to her mouth. "Please," Dad said hoarsely. "May we come in?" Just for a moment. I should have slammed the door. After everything they had done, I owed them nothing. But curiosity and a decade of unresolved feelings held me in place. "Wait here," I said firmly, closing the door partway. I returned to the kitchen where the twins were finishing breakfast. "Girls, I need to speak with some people." Can you go play in your room for a bit? Is everything okay? Lily asked, always sensitive to changes in my mood. Everything's fine. Just some grown-up business. I'll come get you soon. Once they were safely in their bedroom, I returned to the door. My parents still stood there looking uncertain and out of place against the backdrop of the Colorado mountains. 10 minutes, I said, letting them in. That's all you get. They entered awkwardly, their eyes darting around the living room with its photographs of the twins at various ages, the artwork they had made in school, the evidence of our life without them. They're beautiful, Mom said, softly staring at a recent school photo. Why are you here? I asked, not interested in small talk. They exchanged glances and Dad cleared his throat. It's Jessica. She's sick. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it, despite everything. It's leukemia, Mom continued, her voice breaking. Stage 4. The doctors give her 6 months without a transplant. I felt a pang of genuine sympathy. Whatever her faults, I wouldn't wish such suffering on anyone. That's terrible. But I still don't understand why you're here in Colorado after 10 years of silence. Dad's expression hardened slightly. She needs a bone marrow transplant. We've all been tested. None of us are compatible. The doctors said her best chance would be a close relative like the girls. The realization hit me like a physical blow. After a decade without a word, without a birthday card or a Christmas greeting, they had traveled across the country not to reconcile, not to meet their granddaughters, but to ask for parts of their bodies. Let me understand this, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. You disowned me, helped Jessica try to take my children, spread lies about my mental health, and now you want me to let you harvest my daughter's bone marrow. It's not like that, Mom protested. It's a simple procedure. They would barely feel it. You have no idea what you're asking, I said. They're children. They don't even know you. We're their grandparents. Dad asserted, a hint of the old authority in his voice. Grandparents send birthday presents. They call it Christmas. They don't appear after 10 years asking for medical procedures. Jessica is dying, Mom pleaded. These girls are her only hope. These girls are Emma and Lily, I corrected firmly. They're people, not medical resources. They have names, personalities, dreams, fears. You know nothing about them. We want to, Dad said. We've made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But Jessica is still their biological mother. No, she's their genetic donor. I am their mother in every way that matters. I carried them. I birthed them. I raised them. I loved them, when you all tried to take them away. The conversation circled painfully until I finally asked, Does Jessica even know you're here? They exchanged another look. She's too proud to ask, Mom admitted. But she's running out of options. I struggled with conflicting emotions, lingering anger at their betrayal, sympathy for Jessica's plight, fierce protection of my daughters. I need time to think, I said finally. And if we even consider this, there are going to be conditions. Starting with a long overdue, honest conversation. About what? Dad asked warily. Everything. No more lies. No more manipulation. They agreed reluctantly, and I set up a meeting for the following day at a neutral location, a quiet cafe near our apartment. I wouldn't bring the twins until I was certain of their intentions. That night, after the girls were asleep, I researched bone marrow donation in children. It was relatively safe, but not without risks and discomfort. More importantly, it raised complex ethical questions about bodily autonomy. These were my daughters, but they were also individuals with rights over their own bodies. The next morning, I met my parents alone at the cafe. They looked like they had barely slept. Before we discuss anything about the girls, I began, I need to understand exactly what happened with Jessica's diagnosis. When did you learn she was ill? Dad explained that Jessica had been diagnosed 8 months earlier after experiencing unusual fatigue and bruising. Initial treatments had failed, leading doctors to recommend a bone marrow transplant. Why did you wait so long to contact me? I asked. We tried everything else first, Mom admitted. Jessica didn't want to involve you or the girls. It was only when the National Registry failed to find a match that we reconsidered. Something in her phrasing struck me as odd. Reconsidered what exactly? They exchanged another of those meaningful glances that raised my suspicions. There's something you're not telling me, I pressed. Dad sighed heavily suddenly, looking every one of his 70 years. The truth is, Jessica's health issues aren't entirely new. There's a genetic component. What do you mean? The women in my family carry a gene mutation, he explained reluctantly. It increases the risk of certain cancers, including leukemia. My mother died of it, and her mother before her. I felt the blood drain from my face. And you never thought to mention this before I agreed to carry Jessica's eggs. We didn't think it would be relevant, Mom said weakly. Not relevant, I was incredulous. You knew Jessica couldn't safely carry children herself because of this condition, didn't you? That's why you pushed so hard for me to be the surrogate. Dad couldn't meet my eyes, which was answer enough. And the twins, I asked, fear, clutching my heart. Could they have inherited this gene? It's possible, he admitted. The embryos weren't tested. Jessica was against it. The revelation left me speechless with rage and horror. Not only had they manipulated me into surrogacy, but they had knowingly put my daughters at risk of a potentially deadly genetic condition, all while hiding crucial health information. You knew, I said, finally, my voice shaking. You knew, and you deliberately kept it from me because you thought I might refuse. We were desperate for Jessica to have children, Mom pleaded. The doctors said the risk could be managed with proper screening. So you made that choice for me, and for innocent children without informed consent. The full weight of their deception crushed any sympathy I might have felt. This changes everything. The first thing that's going to happen is genetic testing for my daughters, not to find a match for Jessica, but to determine if they carry this mutation. But Jessica needs help now, Dad protested. Jessica has survived 37 years with this condition. My daughters deserve to know their medical history before anyone asks them to undergo procedures for a stranger. She's not a stranger, Mom objected. She's their genetic donor, I finished firmly. Nothing more. And after what you've just told me, I'm not sure any of you deserve to be in their lives. I stood to leave, but Dad caught my arm. Please, Taylor. Whatever you think of us, Jessica doesn't deserve to die because of our mistakes. For all my anger, I couldn't deny the truth in his words. Jessica, for all her flaws, was as much a product of our parents' manipulation as I had been. And medical ethics aside, I wasn't sure I could live with myself if I refused without at least exploring the options. I'll consult with Emma and Lily's pediatrician about genetic testing, I conceded. If and only if they don't carry the mutation and are medically cleared, then we can discuss the possibility of testing for compatibility. But I make no promises beyond that. It wasn't the answer they wanted, but it was the only one I could give while protecting my daughters. As I walked away from the cafe, I realized the truth I had just uncovered would change everything, not just for Jessica, but for all of us. The following week was a whirlwind of medical consultations. Dr. Patel, the twins' pediatrician, referred us to a genetic counselor who explained the testing process in child-friendly terms. I had decided to be honest with Emma and Lily about why we were seeing these new doctors, though I simplified the explanation. We found out some new information about your birth family's medical history, I told them. We need to check if it affects you. Emma, practical, as always, simply wanted to know if the test would hurt. Lily had more questions about the relatives who had suddenly appeared. Are they nice? She asked as we drove to the testing appointment. They're complicated, I answered carefully. They've made some mistakes, but they're not bad people. The genetic testing required only a simple blood draw, but the wait for results was agonizing. Meanwhile, I met with Dr. Patel privately to discuss the bone marrow donation question. Medically, it's relatively safe for the donors, she explained, but ethically it's complex. Children can't give truly informed consent for procedures that don't benefit them directly. As their parent, you'd be making that decision on their behalf. What would you do? I asked her. She considered the question carefully. I'd ensure my children understood as much as appropriate for their age. I'd make sure they weren't being coerced. And I'd prioritize their physical and emotional well-being above all else. Her advice strengthened my resolve to protect Emma and Lily from becoming mere medical resources. When the genetic test results came back, I nearly collapsed with relief. Neither twin carried the dangerous mutation. They were not at increased risk for the cancers that had plagued my father's family. With that critical concern addressed, I faced the question of whether to proceed with compatibility testing. After much soul-searching and consultation with a child psychologist, I decided to meet with Jessica directly, before involving the twins further. She was staying at a hotel near our apartment, too ill to return to Pennsylvania between treatments. When I entered her room, I barely recognized her. The vibrant, beautiful sister I remembered had been replaced by a gaunt figure with hollowed eyes and a scarf covering her hair loss. But her expression still hardened when she saw me. "I told them not to involve you," she said, her voice weaker, but still carrying that familiar edge. "Then why are they here?" She looked away. "Because I'm dying, and they're desperate." Despite everything, my nurse's training kicked in as I noticed her labored breathing and the bruises on her arms. "How are the treatments going?" "Not well." She gestured vaguely at the medications lined up on her bedside table, hence the last-ditch effort to find a donor. I sat in the chair beside her bed. "Jessica, do you actually want to meet Emma and Lily?" The question seemed to startle her. I don't know. I've spent 10 years trying not to think about them. "They're amazing," I said softly. "Emma's fearless, she climbs everything, asks questions that leave her teachers speechless, stands up for kids getting bullied. Lily's quieter but notices everything. She reads constantly, writes stories, remembers birthdays. They're so different, but completely devoted to each other." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "You've done well with them." "I've tried my best." A heavy silence fell between us, 10 years of hurt and absence filling the space. "Why didn't you tell me about the genetic condition?" I finally asked. She sighed. "I was terrified of not having children. Andrew's family expected heirs and I couldn't face being the failure. Mom and Dad suggested using you as a surrogate, and it seemed like the perfect solution. You could have been honest with me. Would you have agreed if you'd known?" "Probably not," I admitted. "At least not without genetic testing of the embryos." "That's why," she said simply. "It was selfish and wrong, but I was desperate." Her honesty, however belated, felt like the first real conversation we'd had in years. "I'm sorry about the cancer," I said genuinely. "No one deserves that." "I'm sorry about everything else," she replied. "The legal battles, the lies." I was so angry that I couldn't see how wrong we were. We talked for nearly 2 hours, clearing the air of a decade of hurt. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but something close to understanding. When I finally explained my position on the bone marrow donation, she surprised me. "I wouldn't ask that of them," she said. "They're children who don't know me. It was Mom and Dad's idea, but it could save your life. Maybe. Or maybe it's too late anyway." She reached for my hand tentatively. "Taylor, whatever happens with my health, would you consider letting me meet them? Just once. No expectations, no demands. Just to see them." The request was so different from what I'd feared that it caught me off guard. This wasn't the entitled Jessica I remembered. Perhaps facing mortality had changed her as profoundly as motherhood had changed me. "I'll think about it," I promised. That night I spoke with Emma and Lily about their biological aunt who was very sick. I explained about bone marrow in simple terms, and that doctors were looking for someone whose blood matched Jessica's to help her get better. "Would we have to get shots?" Emma asked, wrinkling her nose. "Yes, and it might hurt a bit," I answered honestly. "Would it help her for sure?" Lily wanted to know. "Not for sure. It might." Emma considered this. "Do we have to?" "Absolutely not," I assured them. "Your bodies belong to you. No one can make you do this." "But if we don't, will she die?" Lily's sensitive nature went straight to the heart of the matter. "I don't know, sweetie. She might find another donor, or the doctors might find another treatment." The twins looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that never ceased to amaze me. But before they could respond, I had a realization. "Actually," I said, "there's someone else who might be able to help." The next morning I went to the hospital where Jessica was receiving treatment and requested testing for myself. As the nurse who had once carried these children, I shared certain physiological compatibilities that might translate to bone marrow viability. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. While awaiting results, I arranged a carefully supervised meeting between Jessica and the twins. We met at a neutral playground where the girls could engage or retreat as they felt comfortable. "Girls, this is your Aunt Jessica," I said simply. They studied her curiously. Emma direct, as always, asked, "Are you really sick?" Jessica nodded. "Yes, I am. Our mom's a nurse," Lily offered. "She helps sick people get better." Jessica's eyes met mine over their heads. "Your mom is very good at taking care of people." The meeting lasted just 30 minutes. It was awkward but peaceful, a tentative first step toward a relationship that might never fully develop, but acknowledged their connection. 3 days later, I received unexpected news. I was a viable donor match for Jessica. The doctors explained it wasn't uncommon for siblings to be compatible, but the odds weren't guaranteed. When I told Jessica, she seemed genuinely shocked. "You would do that for me, after everything?" "Not for the person who tried to take my children," I clarified, "but for my sister who's sick and has apologized. For the aunt my daughters might someday want to know." The bone marrow donation procedure was painful but straightforward. As I recovered in the hospital, my parents hovered awkwardly, clearly unsure of their place in this unexpected development. "Why?" Dad finally asked. "After what we did, why would you help her?" I thought carefully before answering. "Because holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you. Because I want my daughters to see that compassion isn't reserved only for people who deserve it. And because despite everything, she's still my sister. My donation wasn't a miracle cure. Jessica's recovery would be long and uncertain, but it gave her a fighting chance, which was all anyone could ask for." In the months that followed, we established cautious boundaries. Jessica returned to Pennsylvania for ongoing treatment, but called the twins weekly. My parents sent birthday and Christmas gifts, but respected my request for limited contact until they had demonstrated consistent respect for our autonomy. On the twins' 11th birthday, we hosted a small family gathering that included Jessica, now in remission, and my parents. As I watched Emma showing Grandpa Richard her soccer trophies and Lily discussing books with Jessica, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought us here. 10 years earlier, I had made the hardest decision of my life, choosing to keep the twins, despite knowing it would cost me my family. Now, through circumstances I could never have predicted, we were finding our way back to each other, not as the family we once were, but as something new, something built on honesty, respect, and the understanding that love isn't about possession, but about wanting the best for each other. As the girls blew out their candles, I made my own silent wish that they would carry forward the lesson it had taken our family so long, to learn that true strength lies not in control, but in the courage to let go, to forgive, and to rebuild from the ashes of what was lost. What would you do if faced with such a difficult choice? Would you have kept the twins? Could you find forgiveness after such betrayal? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories about family forgiveness and finding strength in unexpected places. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message today, share it with them. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful beginnings.